quickly. And third item is I do not want to fly back with these. So please pick them up on your way out, okay? Thank you. Thanks again.
Sanam, which is South Asian Network for Addressing Masculinities. And what we have done through Sanam is we've had organized 2 courses, South Asian courses on masculinities and looking at relating it with violence and development, what sort of development paradigms lead to what sort of issues. And the whole focus is, now our panelists are all from Sanam as resource persons, people teaching there, shaping the course of Sanam. And what we are trying to do is to situate masculinities as the central analytical point when we look at models of economic development, if we look at violence, to be able to analyze that from the perspective of masculinities. This is also the theme that is going on around it. So you will have we have 4 speakers. There's Poonam, there's Sanjeev. Poonam is from India. Sanjeev is from Nepal. We have Dina, who was chasing up the internet, so she'll be coming back soon. She's from Bangladesh. And we have Lakshman from Nepal. And Lakshman was also coordinating the entire Sanam processes. And our theme really is, how do we make the links when we think of violent conflicts, development and masculinities in South Asia? And we're looking at it specifically for South Asia. I know some of the Sanam fellows are also here, so which is very encouraging also, and I'm sure when we open it for discussion, they may want to contribute to how in Sanam we have grappled with this theme and to look at the interactions, the links between these very, very important concepts. So I'll start, I'll welcome Poonam. And what we've agreed upon that each presenter will also take a little time to introduce themselves in terms of their work, and then make the presentations. Poonam.
So should I just do that from here? Hi, I am Poonam Kathuria and I work in Gujarat. My major work and essential work centers around the issue of violence against women, and our organization works on this at several levels. So we are working with governance bodies. We have recently set up a rural initiative in a rural tertiary hospital where we are trying to make the health system responsive to the issue of violence against women, because a lot of women, before they go to the police, may seek help through the health services. And if the health services treat it only as an injury and not a violence injury, the cycle of... So I think they have a huge potential in that sense. So we are working with that. We also have set up what we call gender just community-based redressal mechanisms. We call them women's courts. These are women-led and community leadership mechanisms which also support women who face violence and support them through legal aid, through counseling, and through all kinds of services. I'll talk a little later about my presentation and the why I decided to present on a masculinities panel. I'll be talking about women's role in communal rights, particularly in the context of India and in the Hindu communal mobilization context. Thank you. Yes. Is it? Yes, I can. Okay. About it. So that is the context of the Sanam panel, where we are 4 of us from Bangladesh, Nepal. So that's the context, and we'll bring our own context here. And to my second point about, what am I? I am a feminist from the women's movement, And so people said, what are you going to talk about masculinities? And I said, well, I mean, in the last few years, we have seen a whole lot of right-wing mobilization, political party and religious movement mobilization in India of women. And I thought this is another, I mean, this is redistributing or redefining masculinities at another level. And I sort of decided to look at it because I think it also poses immense challenges to feminism, to the feminist movement, and also to the movement for working with men. So that's what I'm going to be looking at. So Babri Masjid, 1992. Babri Masjid is the mosque of Babur, which is located in Uttar Pradesh. And in 1992, the Bharatiya Janata Party, a political party, decided to use this. You did a huge amount of mobilization of people in saying that this used to be the site of a temple once upon a time, and Babur had demolished that temple and had created a mosque there. So they took on a movement to say, okay, we'll demolish the mosque and we will install the Ram idol there. And this is that site. And the other part of this is that when Babri was destroyed in 92, 55,000 women were among the 200,000 strong mob that tore it down. It was the first time in India's history that so many women had participated so prominently on the side of the political right wing. So that was the thing. Over a period we have seen, the Babri was in 92, but prior to that also we have seen right-wing mobilization. So some of you may be familiar with this case of Shah Bano, who was a Muslim woman who was divorced and thrown out of of the house with her 5 children by her husband, and Shah Bano applied for maintenance. The Supreme Court granted her maintenance, and at the same time it made depreciating remarks against Islam and the Prophet. And the way it happened was that the Muslim community then saw it as an interference into their personal and family sphere, and they sort of wanted to retract this judgment, and they said this is an interference, and this led to once again personal laws coming in, and Shah Bano had to retract her stand of Muslim women's right to maintenance under the so-called broader law of the country. Then you have the Roop Kamar Sati, and so again a huge amount of mobilization for and against. So Hindu women saying no, why should Muslim women not get this? But the Muslim women, Shah Bano had to retract, and she chose to remain with the community rather than with the secular feminist movement. It's around the same time that the court in 1985, this was Justice Chandrachud, he mentioned that there's a need for a uniform civil code. Now the demand for the uniform civil code actually came up even in 1951 when Ambedkar was drafting the constitution, but the government then decided not to touch this thing, and they retained the personal laws in the areas of adoption, inheritance, maintenance, marriage, and things like that. So the UCC demand has been there since then. But in 1985, when the women's movement picked it up, it suddenly got embroiled with the BJP's rhetoric, the Bharatiya Janata Party's rhetoric of why are we placating the Muslims, why are certain... So the idea was that the uniform civil code could be actually the codification of the Hindu civil code. So that was the fear, and so once again we were a divided house as feminists. 1987 Roop Kamar Sati incident. Sati was banned in India in 1829. I think all of us are familiar with Sati. Sati is this whole practice of young or women immolating themselves on the pyre of their dead husband. So this was banned as a barbaric practice in 1829, but in 87 in a village in Rajasthan, this 24-year-old woman immolates herself on the pyre, and suddenly again so there's a whole Hindu right-wing movement saying this is all right because she wanted to do it and this is Hindu culture. So once again and a huge amount of mobilization around that happened of the Hindu right forces, including women. So these were some of the things where we are saying you do see mobilization, but what you see in 92 and later in Babri Masjid, then in the Bombay riots, and then 2002 Gujarat carnage was the large-scale women's involvement in later instances of communal violence, particularly Gujarat and all that these were not isolated but very organized kind of phenomena which were becoming. So this was a different kind of a thing, and for the first time this was described often as a hyper-masculinist movement, and it also sparked off fear amongst the feminists that the right wing was taking away all their symbols and using their rhetoric to now mobilize women, and it also forced feminists to revisit our own ideas of women as being democratic, as agents of peacekeeping, and and the secular nature of the women's movement itself, and the Indian feminism seemed fragile for the first time. I mean, till then it was never questioned in that sense, so because it had all kinds of colors. And also this whole idea of false consciousness, because till now, every time a woman committed violence, we said, oh, she's under the influence of patriarchy, this is when she becomes a mother-in-law, this is when she gets power, or she's under the pressure of her husband. So this seemed no longer the case. So this had, I'm saying, this has more questions than answers. Feminist theorizing, like for example, Nivedita Menon, who spoke this morning, she has done a very extensive study of the Meerut riots, and she came up with this idea of that women in general do not want their husbands to be committing violence. But there's another group of feminists like Tanika Sarkar who would say, no, this is so systematic and this is so large scale and it's all about power. So to say that this is atypical, there's a disagreement on that. So there are people who feel it's not, and there are others who feel it is. So women's active participation in communal struggles, it has manifested, let's see how it does. How do women participate in various ways? Women's participation in communalism has manifested itself in a number of ways. Women have been complicit and self-willed participants in the process of community identity formation and have chosen to assert their distinct identity as members of a particular community. Large number of women have responded to calls of mobilization by various communal groups and movements. So, for example, you have offering tacit support. So this was initial: cooking, raising children, preaching communal hatred, maintaining community boundaries in terms of girls not being allowed to marry outside. So this was some of the role that the women played. Second was performing nurturing roles in communal violence, providing arms, even preventing police from coming in. So this was the other kind of a role that women played. Of late, you have also seen in 2008, Hindu women, huge number of Hindu women participated in Jammu, which is part of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, where land was given to Amarnath Shrine Board, and on ecological grounds, it was decided that the land would be taken away from the board. And there was a huge mass agitation, and we can see videos on YouTube of how women sort of participated very actively in that. And then, of course, the whole thing of Kashmiri Intifada, which is popular violence, which is street violence against the operation of the Indian Army. So you can see women's participation now changing forms. You also have people like, I don't know how many of you have heard of Sadhvi Ritambara and Uma Bharti, who are BJP leaders in their own right. So they have been invited to deliver speeches and incite mob violence. And let me show you a picture of these two women. So on top you have Sadhvi Ritambara, and below you have Uma Bharti. And they are both very... Feminization of violence. Women in Gujarat and in Mumbai riots have regularly been known to be participating in looting and arson. Those have been documented. Women in Gujarat have also been involved earlier, before the 2002, in throwing acid bombs and things like that. So then you also have Maya Kodnani. I don't have a picture, but she was subsequently went on to become the Women and Child Development Minister after the 2000 riots. And 2010 or 11, she was the first minister to be convicted and jailed for life for her role in the massacre at Naroda Patia, where 49 people were killed. She was seen distributing swords and sort of leading a mob. So you have Sadhvi Pragya Singh Thakur, who was alleged to have been involved in the September 2006 blast in Malegaon in Maharashtra, and in which 37 people were killed. Then you also have women. So this is one kind of a profile which is emerging of the women. Then you have active membership in religion-based communal political parties under male leadership, which is all right, which is very often. Then founding communal organizations under female leadership. So Rashtra Sevika Sangh, which is part of the RSS, it is the National Women Volunteers Committee. It's a parallel organization, not the women's wing of the RSS. Then you have the Mahila Agadi of the Shiv Sena is the Shiva's army. Shiva was a Maratha ruler and is highly revered Vasundhara, by the way, is a goddess which was also seen as a symbol of Indian feminism, the strength of Indian feminism. And so a lot of places, the feminist posters would say, we are Durgas and we are Kalis, because she's an angry goddess and who's sitting on a tiger. So I'm saying this is the kind of imagery which is now also being usurped by the right wing. So, well, my focus essentially is around the Hindu mobilization, but just to say that this is not only a Hindu phenomena. You have Duktaran e Millat, Daughters of Faith, a Kashmiri all-women's group often referred to as soft terror outfit, founded by Asia Andrabi, imposes puritanical and fundamentalist religious values, does moral policing, and targets women who travel around unveiled. So you have that. So I'm just, this is some of the leaders that I'm showing, and that's a very deliberate picture. And so what you have on top is somebody who's now no more, and she died 10 years ago. This is Vijayaraje Scindia. She was the Maharani of Gwalior state. And so this is again Sadhvi Ritambara. You have Uma Bharti. This is at the point of Babri Masjid. So she's so gleeful that this is Murli Manohar Joshi, and she's sort of on his shoulder celebrating the demolition. And this is Pragya, who in the bomb blast killed 37. And let me just come down to this slide. This is Vasundhara Raje Scindia. She is the Chief Minister of the state of Rajasthan, a BJP, Bharatiya Janata Party state. And just see the imagery. In the first picture, she's all Hindu, trying to cover. So she's being given this symbolic thing of a veil and whatever. Next, you have a sword, and then you have this headgear, which is the symbolic of leadership and chieftainship. So I'm saying, just see the play of all these pictures, and how, what kind of a terrain these women in their leadership are. So they are both at the same time. So they are women and they are men in some ways. So you can see the masculinity and the femininity, how they are playing it up to get leadership and to get power. I also sort of want to go back, and I also want to say, if you look at these women, they are not some rural goons. These are very sophisticated, good-looking, fashionable. Vasundhara Raje is a fashion icon. So if you know, where is she reaching out to? So the constituency is not just rural, non-literate, not aware women. They are reaching out to a different kind of a constituency now. I mean, if you look at this picture of all these women, none of them look non-literate. Some of them are Western educated, and they are here. So this is where I come to when you say subjects with agency. I mean, I found this term very, very interesting, because when you think of the term agency, so obviously it has to have an agent. And agent signifies both, at one level an initiator of action, and at another a passive recipient of it. So, and at another level, if you think of subjects, so it also is, there's an element of supremacy, and then there's an element of subordination. So if you see, women are balancing both, and this is what is happening. 3. Okay, so no, it's just that I have been explaining a lot of things because they were perhaps not familiar. So what is it? I mean, these women are obviously choosing at this point in time a communal identity, a religious identity over their feminist identity or the identity of a woman. So see secularism rather than patriarchy as an opponent. Invoke aggressive masculinity and advocate violence to achieve political goals. Leaders endorse heteronormative femininity. So you don't question the status quo. You stay within the realm of the cultural. The ideal woman's place is in the home, and reproducing and nurturing the nation community is their primary goal. Notions of gender. So suddenly what emerges is the idea of Indian feminism, quote unquote right wing in this case, in quote unquote Hindu feminism. What is questioned? Notions of gender equality and social justice are discarded as Western. So our women have to be brave, they can be modern, they can be educated, but they should come home and still look after the family. So that's the kind of image that they create. So all this gender equality, social justice is Western. The concept of feminine agency is guided by Nari Shakti as against Nari Mukti. So the feminine power, female power as against female emancipation is the purpose. So you can see this number now. So this is a huge mobilization of the Rashtriya Sevika Samiti, the National Women's Committee, the committee which is here. What has happened and what is so specific to the South Asian context is the whole intertwining of religion and politics, and that's a very, very South Asian phenomena. And in this, so how is it this achieved? I mean, I'm just going back to what I've shown you, and I'm saying how is this achieved? Essentially, political agency is construed as a masculine activity. In spite of the fact that women are participating in communal violence, are taking leadership, and women have also demonstrated against communal politics, but women are not seen as political essentially. Political agency is a men's role. In this construct, women seen as repositories of religious beliefs and purity to be revered and protected, their honor to be saved. So what is happening is, so the nation is feminized and the male state must fight her honor, and I must show you something. If you look at the, I have just 4. Very quickly. No, I don't think I am. So you can see this woman. This is Mother India, and you can see there's a male child behind her, and she's sitting in a horse. So the combination of how there is the male state and the mother and the feminine nation, and then you have this great slide which says Mother Sita is crying because of BJP's work. They have eaten away all the money in my husband's name. Her husband is Ram, okay? And then she's basically saying, they are saying we'll make the mandir over there, the temple there, but date nahi batayenge. We will not tell you the date. So it's essentially instigating women now, goading men into action. I mean, this was a brilliant poster that I thought it was. So feminist challenges. With Hindutva's rhetoric also claiming to empower women, progressive feminism faces a serious challenge as they attempt to articulate a coherent position from which to resist communalism, violence, and the Hindu right. Reassessment of the supposedly pacifist nature of women and the influence of feminism in Indian society. I'm not saying, this is not to say feminism is not influential, but we have to reassess how much we have been able to influence and where are we. Appropriation. Hindutva's appropriation of feminist symbols and India and right-wing occupancy of discursive spaces. Emancipation of women within circumscribed boundaries for the sake of Hindutva. So caste, religion, all of those come into play. I am finishing. So you can see how the Durga Vahini is also fighting, having an anti-violence demonstration. And so, so nuanced spaces. Challenges to feminism. Idea of Hindu feminism gains ground. This also brings up for debate amongst the Indian feminists the idea of Dalit and Muslim women's feminism, as both are located in identity politics. Work with men, and I have to say this because otherwise the whole purpose goes. The challenges to working with men for gender equality grow manyfold because it is not consciously questioning the religious or political affiliations. In the work with men, we are not. Whereas the women's movement constantly said we are apolitical, we don't believe in religion and all that. It can easily fall into the trap of right-wing feminism and may end up legitimizing the Hindu right-wing feminism as the Indian brand, because then men are also very happy. My wife is modern, wears sleeveless, looks smart, goes out to work but comes home and cooks. So I'm saying, so this is the brand of feminism which men will also find very, very palatable, and you may just find that it's all there. Thank you.
Thank you, Poonam. We'll move on. Sanjay Visaya, he is going from Nepal, and he will introduce himself as well as his work. Sanjay. And
my name is Sanjeev Upreti, and I am a professor at the Central Department of English at Tribhuvan University. In the last few years, my work has concentrated, my research has gone around various aspects of Nepali masculinities, which I look at. So without losing much Uh, Basically, my presentation will try to look at the nationalistic discourse of Nepal and see how upper caste masculinities, Brahmin and Kshatriya masculinities, are privileged over ethnic masculinities there, and what kind of conflicts it can lead. That is one thing. Second thing is how the discourse of masculinity works in Nepal's foreign relations. So both in the domain of nationalistic discourse as well as in the domain of international relations. How it is traced by masculinity. That's going to be my focus. Like when we talk about the Nepal's history, it is often described as Veer history or brave history. That is often tied to the. It's all right. Just listen. This is basically for me. Don't worry. These are notes. Like for me. So basically, when we talk about Nepal's history, we are talking about the history of the Bir Gorkhalis, who are from ethnic backgrounds, but their histories are often erased, and the histories of the rulers like Ranas and Shahs, they come into the place. And if you look at the representations of their masculinities, if you look at the representations of these masculinities, like Janga Bahadur Rana and Chandra Shamsher Rana, their masculinities are represented as very close to the upper class British masculinity. The idea that these people are strong, brave, but also intellectual. They have logical powers. In comparison to that, the masculinity of the ethnic peoples is often described as close, being similar to the lower class British masculinity. The idea that, these people are brave. And, the kukri, that the weapon he's holding in his hand, that is often described as the symbol of martial bravery. But at the same time, these people are not very logical. And they can make foolish decisions. So these two different kinds of representations of these people. So that works, and I think at the heart of, Nepali nationalism, and that is leading to all kinds of conflict that has recently surfaced in Nepal, especially when people were talking about ethnic federalism. So there was a kind of a lot of conflict between the upper castes and the ethnic peoples. So it is all built into that conflict. If you look at the history of Nepal, either by the British writers or by the elite native historiographers, you find that they are talking about for example, Prithvinarayan Shah, who is a Kshetri. He unified Nepal. He's known for that, but at the same time, he's famous for ordering the cutting of the nose of the ethnic Nevars whom he won. That he ordered that their noses should be cut, and then there are other Kshatriya and Brahmin heroes of the nation. Let's say heroes of the nation: Amar Singh, Balbhadra Kunwar, Bhanubhakta, etc. No ethnic heroes, again quotation marks, in the Veer history. And in the current federalism debate, all these issues are coming up. And some of the ethnic people feel that, their entire race has been, feminization is not the right word, maybe, they are emasculated because of this kind of representations. Tamangs and Madhesis, for example, who were not even given entry into the Nepali army for a long time, because the perception was that these people are not martial enough, not masculine enough, or neither patriotic enough. Masculinity and patriotism often go together in this kind of nationalistic discourse. And then, and then one interesting thing was in January 9, 2010, there was a Brahmin rally in Kathmandu. The Brahmins were talking about their own rights. And then some ethnic people attacked the rally and cut the nose of Surya Bahadur Nepali. They said that we did it in retaliation to what happened 200 years before, when Prithvinarayan had ordered the cutting of the noses of the Kirtipur Nepals. So in other words, historical traumas keep on returning in various ways. And these traumas often erupt in violence, and they are traced by the discourse of masculinity. There is only one thing I wanted to talk about. So far I have talked about the discourse of Nepali nationalism. Now I will talk about how masculinity, traces the domain of international relations, Nepal's contemporary foreign relations, especially with India, because India is seen as a kind of a huge, mighty neighbor across the borders, but also with the West. And then, so at one hand, there is this nationalistic discourse of Nepal, which glorifies our brave history, but at the same time, there is an anxiety, if you look at the texts carefully, there is an anxiety that the foreign nations, especially India, are trying to rape Mother Nepal. So it becomes, the entire discourse becomes very gendered in the kind of modern context. Like, for example, I will, because of the lack of time, this is one thing, that was found in the blogs. The blogs blogosphere, as they call it. I find it a kind of interesting source of study these days. And then there is this blog writer who is writing that, one day foreigners will undress us like Draupadi's Chir Haran, evoking the mythological story, and Luna and Chandrama, like Nepali girls, will be raped openly at Tundik Hill. Like this kind of discourse. And then there is in Nepali there is another blogger. In Nepali there is a proverb: when your own daughter is a nakhar mauli, why to blame the neighbor? In other words, if your own daughter flirts with the neighbor, you cannot really blame the neighbor. You have to put the focus on your daughter itself who is flirting with them. And then he goes on to say that Nepali political parties like UML, Congress, and Madheswadi parties, they are exactly like those daughters who are flirting with the foreign leaders. So like feminization of these political leaders. And then why to blame Indians when it is our own leaders who are Indian dalals? This word dalal is very interesting to me. At dictionary level, dalal means a broker, but it also means a pimp. So the masculinity of a pimp would be very lower order masculinity. So so in Nepal, this discourse of dalal, every political party uses at the election time. You are saying that this political party is dalal, that political party is dalal. So that kind of discourse keeps on repeating itself in the political discourse. I mean, this is a kind of a a representation of our leaders, major leaders, but they are all put on like women's clothes. The idea that that they have turned into a woman because they were not able to write constitution in time. You see, here is another one. All the political leaders of Nepal, put on women's clothes. To me, this was very problematic. A number of feminists in Nepal raised questions against these representations. Like, why are you dressing failed politicians in women's clothes? Is to become a woman to become a failure? So this is what this kind of representation seems to suggest. So this was kind of very problematic to me. And then, this is a person I interviewed in Nepal. He said that at one point in history, Nepal was a masculine nation created by brave Gorkhalis. That masculine nation never bore down its knees, etc., against British colonialism. In contrast, it is India, which had already surrendered to the British, became more feminine after following the example of vegetable-eating, physically frail Mahatma Gandhi. This very, crazy things. But things have changed rapidly in the last few decades. US, that dominates the entire world by military and economic might, has now become the rooster of the contemporary world, while Britain, that had lost the power that it once had, has become a much-loved hen of that powerful global rooster. So this was a kind of, again, masculine discourse functioning in the domain of international relations. The rooster crows and the hen runs around it, applauding its male power, etc. I will just, And then, in addition to that, there is also the fear of the West and its postmodern culture that has seen as destroying the native. The idea that Western postmodern culture is coming to Nepal, and Nepal was a once very brave, it had a very brave, manly culture. That culture is turning into the culture of the Hijras. Because of the entry of the postmodernism in Nepal. And then this is another person I interviewed. Dalals who are selling Nepal's rivers to the India are intoxicated by postmodern culture arriving from the West. Some people are trying to turn Nepal postmodern even before it becomes modern. Such things are done by those men who are ready to turn themselves into women. Again, like the same discourse as I was saying, etc. And then more a man becomes postmodern, more his masculinity is weakened. Such a man gradually begins to act like a woman and ends up becoming a hijra. Finally, he remains neither man nor a woman. And so on and so forth. There is a last, this thing. There is another medicine shop owner which I interviewed in a place called Sorakhutte in Nepal, who says that, I had never heard of third gender people when I was a kid. I don't think there was any third gender during the times of our fathers and grandfathers. Neither was anyone a homosexual. Such things are unnatural. Birds are never third gender, just as dogs and cats are not homosexual. A modern man is never a third gender. It is a natural process to leave tradition behind and move towards modernity. But postmodernism that has arrived from foreign culture is unnatural. This is why I feel that third genders arrived in the Nepal after the so-called postmodern culture did. So, so these, all kinds of strange associations were going there for me. I mean, the reason is, why we are doing this, why I am discussing all this. For me, it is necessary to understand such gender discourse of both nationalism, but also the discourse of international relations and how these discourses become very gendered. And what does that do is that they, first of all, they construct woman as site of honor, but at the same time, they also debase women. You know, the example I gave you, the failed politicians being described as, like women, and, like, so that kind of thing. And then another thing, like the question of foreclosure. When you start using words like dalal, like you are a pimp or something like that, undercuts people's masculinity. And that creates, that closes the discussion even before it begins, right? For example, Nepal has, like a big hydropower potential. A lot of people know that. But whenever Nepali people try to talk meaningfully about it, let's sign a treaty with another country regarding hydropower, someone from the opposite political party would always say that, this guy is a dalal. So the meaningful discussion becomes next to impossible after that. So that creates kind of a foreclosure of the entire thing, which I find a very, problematic. And then, and before I end up, like just two more points I will make and then I will close. And another thing is that builds into the conflict situation. Like, as you said, the return of the historical trauma, Prithvi Narayan Saha cut Kirti Pure's noses, and that is seen, if you look at the plays, etc., a lot of discourse has come around that. If you look at the discourse, the idea is that cutting of the Kirti Pures that happened in the 18th century, that has emasculated Kirti Pures. So now this is the payback time. We will cut the nose of the Brahmins to make things even. So this contest of masculinity functions as an underside of all these ethnic conflicts. So that's one thing that's going on. And then, the final thing is, like such things, such political discourses, discourse of the nation, of the, like international relations, they are surrounding us through the internet, through blogs, through print, everything. So they shape our subjectivity. They shape the social norms with which we grow up. They shape the socialization process itself. That's why I think, because, these things are crucial. I was doing another research which I'm presenting tomorrow at, 2:30 at Kadamba. I hope you can come to that one also. But I was looking at, the relationship between masculinities and gender-based violence. And one of the conclusion I came was, like three things are responsible. One is social structure, and another is law, question of law. But the third most important thing was, social norms, the norms with which we grow up. They shape us the way we are. And because of all these discourses I'm talking about, the political discourses, they surround us from all directions. Every day, you cannot escape the newspapers. You cannot escape the, like internet. They are surrounding us and penetrating into the deep cores of our mind. So they shape our subjectivity, the social norms, and the entire socialization process. That's why I think it's necessary to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Very poignant. I'm sure you're all picking out, before I call Dina, I thought I'm sure you picked it up. You find there is analysis of the language, the discourse analysis, what sort of language is being used. The word dalal is very powerful. It has a sexual connotation. And the images are being explored. The conceptual base is there. So hopefully you'll be seeing the link between all these ways of describing the situation that prevails in South Asia. And now, Dina.
Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Kausar. I'm Dina Siddiqui. I divide my time between the US and Bangladesh, where I teach anthropology at a private university. I'm a member of Sanam Steering Committee and also on the advisory committee of Sangat. And I forgot to say all of this morning when I wanted to, so I'm saying this now. I don't know how many of you were in the morning session and heard me, and if you didn't, that's fine. And I'm not going to actually repeat, I realized when I read my abstract that there's a lot of overlap between what I was going to say and what I've already said. So I'm going to